بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Alhamdulillah, we are gathered here virtually in order to learn the fiqh of fasting and of Tarāwīḥ. Yesterday, we had a guest speaker speak to us, the Masjid Uthman community, Mufti Muhammad Farhan, regarding a pre-Ramadan warm-up, how to be prepared for Ramadan when Ramadan finally comes in less than a week, inshallah, and how to take advantage of the month of Ramadan. But in today's program, we will be discussing the fiqh, the rulings regarding fasting and the rulings regarding Tarāwīḥ. This is a very interesting time in our lives, unfortunately, but it is the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in which we will have to be performing Tarāwīḥ at home. The masajid are closed. They will most likely be closed throughout the most of Ramadan, maybe even the entire Ramadan. And so it is necessary for us to understand how do we pray Tarāwīḥ individually at home or with our family members. So this is what we'll be discussing today. I want to briefly mention one of the spiritual aspects of fasting before we get into the fiqh of fasting. Allah Ta'ala tells us, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ, that all you who believe, fasting has been prescribed upon you as it has been prescribed upon the ones before you, meaning Allah Ta'ala has made it farad not only upon us but upon previous ummahs as well. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that perhaps you may attain taqwa. The purpose of fasting is to attain taqwa. We should understand that, because when a person is aware that Allah Ta'ala is watching him or her, they will not eat, they will not drink, even though nobody else may be watching, right? If you're all alone at home and nobody's watching you, or if you're at work and nobody's watching you, what is stopping you from taking a bite of food? What is stopping you from eating or drinking water on a hot summer day when nobody's watching you? It is exactly taqwa. Taqwa is the thing that is stopping you, and that is the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being conscious of Allah ta'ala watching you. So that is the purpose of our fast. So if we do not feel that we are increasing in our taqwa, then there's something wrong with our fast. Perhaps we are doing something, we are committing sins, we are committing we have some spiritual illnesses or diseases that we have to look at and try to cleanse ourselves of. Because, as I mentioned, the purpose of fasting, it is a spiritual exercise in order to increase one's taqwa. It is a commandment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but Allah ta'ala tells us the hikmah of one of the purposes of why fasting has been mandated. Now, what I'll be doing, inshallah, is I will be sharing with you all some slides. There are two separate slides, one for the fiqh of fasting and one for the fiqh of Tarāwīḥ. The fiqh of Tarāwīḥ, I made those slides, but for the fiqh of fasting, I found some really beneficial slides online. One of my friends sent them to me, made by Mufti Muhammad Zakir and Maulana Fayyaz Rahman. They are really good slides with a lot of detail regarding fasting. We're not going to go through all of them, but inshallah we will use these for the purpose of this section regarding the fiqh of fasting. Inshallah, if anyone has any questions, I would recommend them to please take note of them. Don't ask them during the program because they may get answered while I'm explaining another mas'ala, or perhaps during this course of my explanation. Also, I won't always be looking at the live chat on YouTube. If you want to ask a question during the program, feel free to, but I will only look at them when I am done with both sections regarding fiqh of fasting and fiqh of Tarāwīḥ. So if you have any questions, please take note of them and then ask them at the end, or you can send them in, but I won't see them until I am done. So There are quite a few slides in this presentation, and as I mentioned, we're not going to be covering all of them, but there are different contents that we will be discussing. The first is the definition of fasting. Then we will look at the intention that one must have when fasting. What are the mustahab acts during fasting? What is preferred and beloved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for one to do while fasting? What is makruh, disliked while fasting? Things that will break the fast, things that will not break the fast, number 6, and frequently asked questions, and finally the exempt. We'll also cover du'as, but very briefly, inshallah. So the definition of fasting. Number 1 is that fasting literally means to abstain from something. In terms of Sharia, it means to abstain from food or drink or sexual relations during the day, from dawn till sunset. So while a person is fasting, they must abstain from 3 things: food, drink, and intimate relations with their spouse, or with anyone for that matter. But these 3 things are necessary to refrain from while one is fasting. And of course, one does it with the intention. The intention is necessary. In order for a fast to be valid, one has to have the intention. And we'll discuss that in detail when the section of intention comes. But the intention is to gain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who has to fast? Fasting in the month of Ramadan is obligatory for every adult, male or female, who is healthy both physically and mentally and is not a traveler. So there are 3 conditions. Number 1, a person has to be baligh. As with all of the ahkam of Islam, one is not mukallaf, one is not responsible to complete one of the obligations of Islam unless they are baligh, unless they have reached the age of puberty, which differs. So as soon as one reaches the age of puberty, and if someone does not have the signs of reaching the age of puberty, for example, they do not menstruate, they do not have a menstrual cycle, or they do not have a wet dream by the age of 15, then by the age of 15, one will be considered an adult Islamically. If one has one of these signs of reaching the age of puberty before that, so whether it be at the age of 12 or 13 or 14, then they will be considered an adult Islamically at that age, and fasting will be obligatory upon them, as is the case with all of the other ahkam of Islam as well. So number one has to be baligh. They have to be mature physically. Number 2 is that a person has to be mentally stable. Right? It's the one who is not mentally stable, one who is mentally insane, they are not mukallaf of the ahkam of Islam as well. So a person who has mental illnesses and they cannot differentiate between right and wrong, or they do not know the ahkam of Islam, then Islam does not make that person mukallaf and responsible for fulfilling the actions. Just like a person in a very old age, a senior person, they may be forgetting things, they may have dementia, they may have Alzheimer's, they don't know what they're doing. Of course, fasting is not applicable upon, it is not obligatory upon such individuals. Also, those who have an illness that may prevent them from fasting, and we'll get into those illnesses, inshallah, when the section comes. The second thing that we'll be discussing, as I mentioned, is the intention. The intention has to be made for the fast to count. Okay, and I mentioned this already, but the intention, it is necessary to make this intention every single day, right? So it is not sufficient for one to just simply intend at the beginning of Ramadan that, my first fast is going to be valid for every fast afterwards, but one has to have an intention throughout whenever they're making their fast. But the common misconception, which has to be clarified, is that fasting does not require, or the intention in general for most forms of ibadah, and this is not all, but most forms, the intention, it is not required for a person to verbally say the intention that I am fasting for the sake of Allah on such and such date, on a Thursday, of the month of Ramadan, that is not necessary. Likewise, when a person enters into salah, when a person begins salah, it is not necessary for that individual to say, I am praying 4 rakat, farad salah, facing the Kaaba in a state of wudu. That is not necessary. As long as the person knows in their heart what they are doing, that is considered an intention. So likewise, if a person is waking up in the month of Ramadan for sahri, for suhoor, and they are eating, obviously the intention, the purpose for which they are waking up and eating is to fast. So that will suffice as a person's intention, inshallah. But they should also you should try to make it clear why you are fasting. So if a person stays away from all those things that break one's fast without an intention, the fast will not be valid. Right? So even if you from Fajr till Maghrib do not eat, do not drink, abstain from intimate relations, that will not count as a fast unless and until you make an intention before the necessary time. And for different types of fasts, whether they're nafil, whether they're obligatory, whether they're wajib, the time limit for when a person must make the intention is different. But for the purpose of Ramadan, and this is what we are speaking about today, the time limit is until what is known as Dhawatul Kubra, which is midday. And the way that you calculate midday is that you look at when Fajr time starts and when Maghrib time starts, and you calculate how many hours of the day that is. Okay, so there's a good infographic on the next page, a good graphic here. Now let's say Fajr starts at 4 o'clock and Maghrib starts at 9 o'clock. So altogether that's 17 hours. That's 17 hours of the day from Fajr till Maghrib. So you take half of that, right? This is not what is known as noon normally, right? Noon may be half the day, may not be half the day, but 12 o'clock, like midday, is not necessarily the Dhawatul Kubra, right? One has to calculate it properly. In the winter time is going to be different, and the summertime is going to be much different. So 17 hours from Fajr till Maghrib, hypothetically speaking, if you break that in half, if you cut that in half, 8.5 hours is exactly half day. So in this particular scenario, 12:30 p.m. will be considered Dhawatul Kubra. So until Dhawatul Kubra, until 12:30 p.m., one can make their intention. So let's say that a person, they missed suhoor, they woke up and they realized, oh, I forgot to make my intention for fasting. They can still make their intention for fasting as long as it is before this time, before midday. And the way that you calculate midday Islamically is by looking at Fajr and Maghrib and splitting that in half. Okay, so there are some questions that that are mentioned in these slides, that are posed in these slides for everyone to ponder over, and then the answer is given, of course. So the first question is, Ahmed woke up to partake in suhoor, however, he forgot to make intention. Will his fast be valid? So I mentioned this before, right? That if a person wakes up for suhoor, the reason why they're waking up for suhoor is obviously to fast. Although they're not verbally saying that I'm making my intention for this purpose, or I am eating for the purpose of fasting, but obviously they know within their heart the reason why they are waking up for suhoor, and that is to fast. So it will suffice. So even though he did not verbally mention the intention, it will still count. Okay, so mustahab acts while one is fasting. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned that 3 things are from the characteristics of the prophethood: to hasten to open the fast, right? So to open the fast, one may mistakenly think that it is piety to delay. When Maghrib time starts, if Maghrib time starts at 7:30, for example, and one says, you know what, I'm going to delay it. I'm going to prolong my fast for the sake of Allah, and I'm going to open my fast at 8 o'clock. No, that is actually disliked, because part of following the Prophet ﷺ, the ittiba' of the Prophet ﷺ, is to do exactly as he did, whatever he did. Even if we think that we are putting more difficulty upon ourselves because we are prolonging the fast, or we are not eating suhoor, so we're going to make the fast longer, we're going to suffer more. No, that is not proper ittiba' of the Prophet ﷺ. That is not what Sharia, what Allah Ta'ala wants from us. So these 3 things are to hasten to open the fast, to delay the suhoor, meaning to eat the suhoor as close to Fajr as possible, and to place the right hand over the left hand in salah, right? So to place the right hand over the left hand. Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu relates that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would stand up to offer salah after eating his food. And the timing between the start of Fajr and when the Prophet ﷺ would stop eating was equivalent to the recitation of 50 verses. So not very long, right? There were just, you could say, maybe 5 to 10 minutes between when the Prophet ﷺ would finish eating the suhoor and when Fajr time would come in. And one of the benefits of delaying the time that one has, if a person wakes up 30 minutes before or 45 minutes or an hour before Fajr time starts, they can delay eating till close to Fajr time, make sure they do not eat into Fajr time, but stop a couple minutes before Fajr time begins, and they can try to partake of the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ to pray tahajjud, right? Even though we'll be discussing Tarāwīḥ in the next portion of today's lecture, we'll be discussing Tarāwīḥ. Tarāwīḥ is one sunnah, but tahajjud is also another sunnah. So one should not just try to suffice with one, but they should try to do both. So one can wake up early, pray tahajjud, and then eat suhoor, or eat the suhoor, then have a couple of minutes where they, when they stop a couple of minutes, 5-10 minutes before Fajr time starts, pray 2 rakats during that time, or however much is possible for that person. The Prophet ﷺ, as is mentioned in this hadith as well, is the Prophet ﷺ used to open his fast with dates. So that is another sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, things that are makruh to do while one is fasting. To chew flavorless gum. Okay, like if there is gum that does not have any flavor and one is just chewing that gum, that's not very likely, right? Most people don't do that. But let's say rubber or plastic item, or basically something that is not considered food, right? So someone is chewing on their pen or the cap of their pen or some other item like this, that is makruh, because you're still putting something in your mouth, you're still doing something that you shouldn't be doing during fasting, which is, you are resembling someone who is eating. Also some of the flavor, if there is any flavor in that thing that you are chewing, it may go into your mouth as well. So these are things that are makruh. To collect one's saliva in the mouth and then to swallow it, trying to quench one's thirst. So let's say that you're very thirsty, so you collect the saliva in your mouth. Although it's very, it's not such a pleasant thing to think about. It's kind of disgusting, but someone may do this, right? Where they're gathering the saliva in their mouth and then swallowing in order to quench their thirst. That will be makruh. Although it won't break the fast, but it's still makruh. To delay a bath that had become obligatory until after Fajr time, intentionally, right? So let's say that a person has to do ghusl, okay? Either they had a wet dream or they had intercourse with their spouse, and now they have to do ghusl. So to intentionally delay that until after Fajr time, obviously that is makruh. Why? Because you're missing Fajr. If a person wakes up accidentally after Fajr time has passed, then inshallah there is no blame upon that person. If they were trying to wake up, they had the alarm clock, they were making the intention to wake up. But if a person slept through Fajr, or rather on the opposite scenario, if a person was awake during Fajr time and they had to perform ghusl, but they didn't until after Fajr time was done, obviously that means that the person missed Fajr Salah. So that would be makruh. To use toothpaste now this is a makruh of fasting. Obviously it's a sin. That's separate, right? That's a sin for missing the prayer. But in terms of the fast, it will also make the fast makruh as well. Now, the last thing that is mentioned here on this slide is to use toothpaste or tooth powder to cleanse one's teeth. So if one is using toothpaste, and one should try to avoid using toothpaste because the toothpaste may go down the throat. They may swallow the toothpaste, right? And if that happens, then the fast will break. But if one is absolutely sure that they will not swallow the toothpaste, and they are just brushing their teeth and spitting it out and rinsing the mouth out and no toothpaste goes inside, that is still, the fast will be valid, of course, because nothing went down the mouth, but you're jeopardizing the fast, because if it accidentally does go down down the throat, then the fast will be broken. So what should one do instead? They should try to use the miswak. The miswak is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ used to use the miswak while fasting as well. So a simple solution to this is to act upon the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, to get a miswak and to use the miswak while fasting. It brings a pleasant smell to the mouth, and it accomplishes what the purpose of why one would want to use toothpaste. Some more makruh acts to do while fasting is to complain of the fast, right? To complain of hunger and thirst, right? We are fasting for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't want to complain and say, oh, I'm so thirsty, I'm so hungry. No, you're doing it for the sake of Allah. You should not be complaining. To take the water too much up the nostrils when cleaning the nose, right? So you have to be careful in gargling the mouth, as is the next point as well, and when cleaning the nose when making wudu or when doing ghusl, because if it accidentally goes down, then the fast will break. To fight, to argue, to quarrel, to use indecent language, right? To curse, all of these things obviously are against the spirit of Islam and the spirit of fasting. To backbite, to tell a lie and swear are sinful acts. Obviously, even when one is not fasting, but when one is fasting, the sins that are committed during the month of Ramadan are multiplied. So it is even more so detestable. Things that will break the fast break the fast. So there are two things that are necessary for something to be considered as an invalidator of the fast. Number one is that it has the possibility of reaching the stomach or the brain. So if it reaches, basically these two organs are what gives energy. So if something reaches the stomach through, as number two it mentions, to the normal channels or openings of the body, for example, the mouth, the nose, or the back private area. So if something goes through these avenues and reaches the stomach, then it will break the fast. Okay, the example of something going to the mouth or nose is quite clear, right? Mouth, you're eating, or nose, you're washing your nose while you're doing ghusl, and it goes down your throat. And the example of something breaking the fast by going to the back private part would be a suppository, right? So if one uses a suppository while they're fasting, and if the medicine is goes deep inside the rectum, then that would invalidate the fast. So invalidators are of two types. When a fast is broken, either it will just require a qada, or it will require a qada and a kafara. So either just a qada or a qada and a kafara. Obviously, things that require a qada and a kafara are of a greater magnitude. If you see this red line right here, I don't know if you can see my cursor. This is the cutoff point. Basically, this is the red line. If anything goes down the throat, beyond this red line, then that would be considered, then the fast would be considered invalid. Obviously, if it's just within the mouth, that would be valid still. So those things, as I mentioned, there are two different categories, right? One which requires one to just only make qada. They only have to make up the fast. If they do these things, then they only have to make up one fast out of the month of Ramadan. But the other category is that which requires qada and kafara, meaning they have to make up the fast, but they also have to do expiation for that. And we'll discuss what the expiation for intentionally breaking a fast is. However, the first thing that we're going to be speaking about are those things that only necessitate qada. So you only have to make up one fast. There's no kafara or expiation that is needed. Eating or drinking accidentally while conscious or fasting. So if a person eats or drinks accidentally, so there's a difference between forgetfully and accidentally, okay? And this will be mentioned later on in the slide as well, but I'll jump the gun and mention it here, that if a person is used to eating or drinking at a specific time, right? If a person is at school or at work and they usually, between classes or between meetings, they drink some water, they go to the water fountain and drink some water, and as a habit, it's the first Ramadan or the second Ramadan, they're not used to fasting, so they go to the water fountain and drink water. That's done forgetfully, right? So that's fine. The fast is not invalidated. The fast rather is still valid. Okay, and as we learned to the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ actually said that أطعمه الله وسقاه, that Allah has fed that person and has given drink to that person. It's a ni'mah from Allah. It's a blessing from Allah, that the person forgetfully ate or drank during their fast. However, that's one thing, right? Forgetfully doing something, and accidentally doing something is another thing. So accidentally would mean that a person knows that I am fasting and they're gargling their mouth, but water goes down their throat. Or they're rinsing their nose. They know they're fasting, but water accidentally goes down their nose into their throat. That would invalidate the fast. However, there would be no expiation needed. One does not have to do kafara, but they do have to make up the fast, right? Accidents are something that are given weight in Islam, right? If a person accidentally, hurts someone in this world, right? A person is hunting and they accidentally shoot someone, obviously there will be some consequences for that thing. They can't take away the fact that a person has passed away or that they injured someone, although they did not mean to, right? They were aiming at the animal, they accidentally hit someone, a human. That does not take away from the fact that they accidentally harm someone, right? So things that are done accidentally will still necessitate to make that action up. For example, in this scenario of accidentally eating or drinking, you're eating, you know that you're fasting, and you're trying not to have the water go down your throat, but it still does. One will have to make up the fast. However, on the other hand, as I mentioned, forgetfully doing something is a different scenario. That's a different case altogether. The second thing that the author that is mentioned here on the slides is that eating or drinking because one thought Maghrib entered, but Maghrib did not enter. So you think, you look outside, you say that, okay, it looks like it's Maghrib time, so you eat, but then you realize that it's actually not Maghrib time. It was very cloudy, for example, or you look at the timetable and you realize, okay, I was looking at the wrong date. And so you ate before Maghrib time started, that will invalidate the fast. Kafara is not necessary, but you still have to make up the fast after Ramadan. Eating or drinking because one doubted that Fajr entered, but Fajr really did enter. So on the flip side, right, I gave the example of Maghrib, but on the flip side, if during Fajr time, if one is, they know that Fajr starts at, for example, 4:30, and they think that it's 4:28 still, so they're eating a little bit, but then when they realize, they look at the clock and they see that it's actually 4:31 or 4:32, then the fast will be invalid. They would have to make that up. And eating or drinking forgetfully and thereafter thinking that the fast is broken, to deliberately eat and drink again, right? So if one forgetfully, like I mentioned, right, forgetfully doesn't have any effect on the fast if one eats or drinks forgetfully. But if one does so and then thinks, oh wait, you know what, my fast is broken, I might as well eat now. That, because they are not purposely doing this, right? They're doing this from a misunderstanding that they have. That will not necessitate kafara, but it would, one will obviously have to make up the fast still because they're eating or drinking during the daytime. Other things that will invalidate the fast, but will only require qada and not kafara, are, for example, to swallow a pebble or another item that people would typically not eat, right? So something that is not considered as food, does not have any nutritional value. For example, someone has a habit of chewing paper, or someone is chewing on their cap, as I mentioned, or they're chewing a pebble, which I don't know why they would, but let's just say, for example, someone is chewing a pebble, and the pebble, they swallow that pebble, right? I think a more realistic example would be like someone playing with something in their mouth, or a coin or something, for example, and they accidentally swallow that. That would not necessitate kafara because it is not normally what is considered as food, but it would invalidate the fast because you put something foreign from outside of the mouth into the mouth and swallowed it, even if it was done accidentally. Swallowing water by accident when gargling for wudu or ghusl, I already mentioned this example. Swallowing blood that exits from the gums and is more than the saliva. So if you're bleeding from your gums, let's say you're using the miswak and you're bleeding, and you're bleeding a lot, such that if you were to spit out, you see that the blood is more dominant than the saliva. So that would, number one, break your one's wudu, right? So that's a different hukum, that it would break the wudu, but it would also invalidate the fast if one swallows that blood. Okay, but if one is bleeding very, just a little bit of blood, very lightly, and one swallows that, that would not invalidate the fast. Obviously, swallowing toothpaste or mouthwash, as I mentioned, and swallowing one's vomit. If one intentionally vomits, if one vomits and the vomit is a mouthful, and if one puts that vomit back down, swallows that again, then that would invalidate the fast as well. But if one just has a spit up, okay, if someone, for example, sometimes when people burp, a little bit of vomit comes into their mouth, and if they swallow that, then inshallah the fast will not break. However, if it is a mouthful, meaning that it is difficult to hold in one's mouth, and if one tries to, they think that, oh, if I spit this out, then maybe my fast will break, although it won't. So they try to swallow that back down, then that would invalidate the fast. Now, some more scenarios of things that will invalidate the fast, but not require kafara, only qada. Water used to clean the nose for wudu or ghusl. We already did this example. Inhaling medicine into the nostrils. Okay, if one has a medicine that they have to inhale through the nostrils, and if that medicine goes down the throat, then that would invalidate the fast. So what one should do is, if they have to take some sort of nose medication through their nose, they should ask their daughter if they can. They should ask their doctor if they can have take it, like for example, through a Q-tip in which they place it in their nose, but that it won't go down the throat. If it does go down the throat, then that would invalidate the fast. Inhaling smoke by one's doing. For example, if there are incense in the room, or you're lighting bakhur, and the smoke, it has a perceptible body, you can see it, and you're purposely inhaling that would invalidate the fast. Just like smoking cigarettes obviously would as well. But if a person is passing by a place where there is smoke, for example, you're walking outside and there is a bonfire, someone has a fire lit or something like that, and you happen to inhale that smoke, that would not invalidate the fast. That would not invalidate the fast. Likewise, if you go to someone's house while you are fasting and they have incense in their house, or they have bakhur lit, and that smoke, you unintentionally or accidentally inhale that would be valid as well. Okay. Now, what necessitates a qada and a kafara? As I mentioned, those were only things that necessitate qada. But now we're going to be speaking about things that necessitate qada and kafara. So one has to make up the fast and also do expiation, which is to fast 2 consecutive months, okay, 60 days. In principle, if a person purposely breaks his fast in Ramadan without a valid shari'i reason, through eating, drinking, or engaging in intercourse, then he will have to make up the broken fast after Ramadan and also observe the kafara. So if one purposely does so, right, that's separate. And as a teaser, this will come as one of the questions that will be presented here. So keep this in mind, that a person has to purposely break their fast. If a person never had the intention to fast in the first place, although they're committing a sin, if they had to, for example, they're not traveling, they're not sick, there's no other reason barring them from fasting, and they don't have the intention to fast, they will be sinful for missing that fast, but they will not have to do kafara because they did not break a fast after it has started. So what is the kafara? The kafara is to fast 60 days consecutively. Okay, if the 60 days of fast are not kept consecutively, a person will have to start all over again. So let's say a person even fasted for 45 days, and then they decided, you know what, I don't feel like fasting today. They will have to start all over again, because this is a kafara, this is an expiation. You did something severe, right? You purposely broke your fast in the month of Ramadan. This is kind of like a punishment, right? Or an expiation for the sin that you committed. So a person has to fulfill these as Allah Ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, as the Prophet ﷺ taught us, which is to do 60 days consecutively. If it is broken in between, then one has to start all over again. If one decides not to fast anytime within those 60 days, then they will have to start the 60 days all over again. Now, as a note, the menstruation for a woman does not break those 60 days, right? So if a woman she has to do kafara for breaking a fast intentionally, and within those 60 days, she experiences hayd, which obviously you're not allowed to fast when you are experiencing hayd, that will not count as, breaking the 60 days. That's valid. She will avoid fasting during those days, 3 to 10 days, however many days she will have hayd for, and then she will continue from that point. So let's say she did 35 fasts, and then she has hayd. Once her hayd finishes, she will complete the rest of the 25. If one is not able to do this, if one is not able to fast for 60 days consecutively, one may feed 60 poor people 2 meals for a day, or one person 2 meals for 60 days. And this is mentioned in the Quran, okay? And in the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So one has to feed 60 poor people 2 meals for a day, or one person 2 meals for 60 days. Okay. Yeah. If an old person is not able to fast, and we'll mention that a little bit later, or a person is sick, then they will not have to do kafara. And in place of their fast, we'll mention the fidya that they have to give. Okay. When a person has to do qada and kafara, they will first make up the qada, then they will do the kafara. So a person will first make up the fast that they missed and then do the 60 days. That fast does not count as part of the 60 days. Okay, so basically altogether it would be 61 days. Now, these are actions that don't invalidate the fast. They're completely valid to do while one is fasting. As a reminder, if you have any questions, please do leave them in the live chat. If you want to leave them right now, you can. Inshallah, I'll scroll through them after, when I'm done with both presentations. Or you could just take note of it and ask at the end, but I will not be able to answer during the presentation. Okay, actions that don't invalidate the fast. For example, eating or drinking forgetfully, I already mentioned that. Swallowing one's saliva, I mentioned that as well. Or the wetness that remains after fasting, after washing the mouth, right? So these are two important things. There is a common misconception that I know some people have, unfortunately, that swallowing one's saliva, some people, they salivate a lot, their mouth, they have a lot of saliva in their mouth. So I know some individuals who think that swallowing the saliva will invalidate the fast, so they're constantly spitting. They're constantly spitting, right? That's just a trick of shaitan. That's waswasa, a whisper of shaitan that is completely unfounded. You can swallow your own saliva. It is completely okay, right? What is makruh to do is to intentionally gather one's saliva and to swallow it in order to remove your thirst, right? That is makruh. But to simply swallow your saliva, it is completely valid, okay? To think otherwise is just shaitan playing with you. Okay, also if a person is washing their mouth, they're rinsing their mouth, they spit out the water that remains within the mouth, they don't have to keep spitting to make sure that all of the water is gone. No, it is okay even if the leftover water, that is, after you spit the water out, the leftover wetness that remains, that is valid, right? So these are tricks of shaitan that shaitan oftentimes bothers people with, that they have to keep spitting to make sure that they're not invalidating the fast. Okay, another thing that does not invalidate the fast is sniffing mucus, even if it descends down the throat. So if you have something in your nostrils and you sniff, that would not invalidate the fast if the mucus goes down the throat. Okay, I mentioned the next one, inhaling smoke or dust unintentionally. Starting the fast in the state of major ritual impurity. So let's say that a person wakes up right before Fajr time starts. Okay, so they wake up 20 minutes before Fajr. So it's suhoor time. Suhoor time is almost done, and they have to perform ghusl. Okay, either they had intercourse with they had intercourse, or they had a wet dream. So they have to perform ghusl. Or for example, a woman's haid has completed during the nighttime and now they have to perform ghusl. So the question is, what should they do? Should they perform ghusl and then eat? Or should they eat because they may miss the suhoor time? They should eat, right? It's okay. You should eat and then you could perform ghusl after Fajr time has started. Okay, so to start the fast in a situation, in a state where you have to perform ghusl, that's fine. Okay, basically to start the fast in a state of janaba is fine. Injection, blood transfusion, kidney dialysis, glucose or saline drips, all of these things will not invalidate the fast. Okay, to have an injection, to get blood taken out, to get blood drawn while fasting, or eye drops, these will not break the fast. If a person has like extremely dry eyes, for example, and they have to take eye drops, that is valid. Okay. We've done most of these. So the last one that I want to mention is nicotine patches from the actions that don't invalidate fast. Nicotine patches. Okay, so if a person is trying to curb the habit of smoking, they're addicted to smoking and they're trying to stop, and they're using nicotine patches, that will not invalidate the fast. Okay, because as was previously mentioned, it is not something that is going down the throat or down the nose or through the backside. Right? Okay, now frequently asked questions. How does one decide what is considered a mouthful of vomit? I already mentioned that it is difficult to hold it back. Okay. Okay. Now a little bit of vomit went up my throat. Then, as a reflex action, it went back down. I felt I had no control over it. Does my fast break? I mentioned this as well previously. No, it does not. Now, can I swallow bits of food left between my teeth? Right. Let's say Fajr time has started, you're done with suhoor, and you have some leftover food within your in your teeth, in between your teeth. And the leftover food, as you are praying salah, for example, or just throughout the day, that leftover food comes out and it goes down. You swallow it. Is that fine? Yes, it is fine. It will not invalidate the fast if the particle of food is less than a chickpea in size. So if it is bigger than a chickpea, which means that there's a lot of food in your mouth, and then you swallow that will invalidate the fast. However, if it is smaller than a chickpea, you're eating cereal. This happens, is very common. You're eating cereal, something gets stuck in between your teeth. You try brushing your teeth, but you're not able to get it out. And then that goes down your throat while you're fasting. The fast is still valid. Ideally, you should brush your teeth, floss, make sure that there's nothing in between, but it is fine if that does go down the throat. If it is bigger than a chickpea, as I mentioned, it will invalidate the fast, but it will only necessitate qada, not kafara. If food is within the teeth, if there's some food in your mouth, then you take it out, then you put it back in your mouth and you swallow, that would invalidate the fast. Okay, even if it's less than a chickpea. The reason why is because you're putting something from outside of the mouth, right? It was inside your mouth, you took it out, now you're putting it inside, so it's as if you're eating. Okay, do eardrops and eye drops break one's fast? No. Okay. Nasal spray, I already mentioned this as well. Deodorants and perfumes. If the aerosol spray, like if the deodorant, if you're using Axe, for example, if it has a defined body, you can see the body, you can see the vapors, and you inhale that, so you're spraying it, and you inhale it purposely, that would invalidate the fast. Okay, if one is not cautious while applying these sprays and it goes down the throat, it will break one's fast. However, if it is done like someone else is spraying, right? You inside your home, someone is spraying perfume or someone is spraying air freshener, and that happens to go down your throat. You did not intend to do it. It just went down. That would not break the fast. Okay, so you can apply perfume, you can apply itar, all of these things. There's no problem with it. What is specifically being spoken about here is cologne or sprays that have a perceptible body. You can see it. You can perceive the body. You can see the defined body, like Axe. If you were to spray Axe in the air, you would see the spray. So if that goes down your throat, then that would invalidate the fast, provided it was you who did it. If it was someone else and you accidentally swallowed it, then that would be fine. Okay, smoking, of course, smoking, whether shisha or cigarettes or marijuana, will break the fast. Not only will it necessitate qada, but also kafara. Okay, it will also necessitate kafara, right? One may argue that it's not bringing me nutritional value, right? Some people say that, right? It's not bringing me nutritional benefit. So, why does it break my fast? Or why does it necessitate kafara? The reason why is because it is something that you like, right? There are so many things that do not bring nutritional value or nutritional benefit, but it's still will break it's still food, right? It's still something that you consider you like. For example, Coke or some sort of soda or some sort of unhealthy fried foods, right? They would still, obviously, they're considered as food. So same thing with cigarettes, although they do not bring nutritional value and they have no benefit, but it would still break the fast and necessitate kafara. Okay. The asthma pump, as I mentioned, if someone using an inhaler, it will not invalidate. It will invalidate the fast, but it will not necessitate kafara. It will not necessitate kafara. Okay, if one has to use it, then they can use it. Inshallah, there's no problem, but they have to make up that fast. Okay. Injections will not break the fast. Okay. Now, what about menstruation? Okay, as I mentioned, this is near the end of the slides. So we covered most of the slides. But what about menstruation during fasting? This is an important section. One of three scenarios that a woman may experience while she is fasting. Number one is that the Ramadan has began while she is in the state of menstruation, while she is in hayd. If that is the case, fasting was never obligatory upon her, because you cannot fast while you are in the state of hayd. Okay, I skipped this hadith just for the sake of time, but I'll mention it again. I'll present it here. That Aisha radiallahu anha mentions that we passed through this period of menstruation and we were ordered to complete the fast later, but we're not ordered to complete the prayers, right? If a woman experiences hayd while fasting, she does not have to make up the prayers, but she will have to make up those fasts, right? Because the fasts are limited, right? She may miss 3 to 10, depending on how long her hayd is. She may miss 3 fasts, she may miss 10 fasts. She can make that up throughout the year, right? There's 365 days in a year. She can easily make that up. But for missing salah, that can become a lot, right? Let's say that a woman's hayd is 7 days. That's 35 salah she would have to make up. That's unreasonable. That's very difficult. So Sharia does not mandate that a woman makes up the prayers, but she does have to make up the fast. So if the month of Ramadan has began while she's in a state of hayd, she will just, she can eat, she could drink, there's no problem, but she should do it in a situation or in a way that no one sees her, right? Because it causes difficulty, for example, to her family members. If she's eating in front of them, they will get hungry, it will bother them. Also, as a means of haya, as a means of modesty, if a woman is eating and drinking in front of others, people will know that she is in the state of hayd, and that is not something that should be openly told. Okay, number 2 is menstruation starts during the day. So let's say that a woman was fasting, but during the daytime, her hayd starts. So what she should do is she can eat and she can drink. There's no problem, because obviously fasting is not obligatory upon her. But once again, she should do it in a way that nobody sees her. To purposely refrain from eating or drinking would be wrong, right? Because she does not have to fast. So if she started the day fasting and during the day hayd starts, then she would break the fast. She can eat, drink, do whatever she wants. She should not continue fasting because fasting is not obligatory upon her. However, in the third scenario, let's say that she started the day not fasting because she had hayd, right? So menstruation stops during the day. So she was not fasting from Fajr time, but during the daytime, let's say around Dhuhr time, her hayd stops. Now what should she do? She should refrain from eating. She must actually refrain from eating and drinking. She cannot eat or drink, because technically the hukum of fasting is obligatory upon her, right? There's nothing barring her from fasting anymore. The hayd is gone. So now she has to fast. So she should act as if she's fasting. Although the fast does not count because the daytime has already started, she will have to make it up later. But technically, because there's nothing stopping her from fasting now, she should refrain from eating or drinking or intimacy for the remainder of the day. Does a nursing woman, a breastfeeding woman, have to fast during the daytime? If she fears that it will cause harm to her baby, then she will not have to fast. For example, if she has to eat a certain amount of calories while to produce the milk, then, and if she's not able, if she doesn't eat that much, then she will not be able to produce milk, then she does not have to fast. Likewise, a pregnant woman as well. If she fears that by not eating, and it has to be a valid fear, right? If a woman is very early on in her pregnancy and the doctor says that it's okay to fast, then she should try fasting. However, if she feels that she cannot, or the doctor says that she should not, then by all means she should not, right? She should not risk the fetus, the baby in her stomach. But the reason why I wanted to mention that is because a lot of people mistakenly think that there's just a green card to not fast if someone is pregnant. No, rather they have to have certainty, or they have to know either through the doctor telling them, or they feel unhealthy, that by fasting it will cause harm to the baby. Especially if a woman is very later on in her pregnancy, very advanced in her pregnancy, like the 7th, 8th month. Obviously, not eating throughout the day will be very detrimental to the baby. Even early on, that can happen as well. So, if she fears that it will cause harm to the baby, to the child, or herself, then she does not have to fast. Obviously, that would not require kafara. It would only require qada afterwards. One does not have to make up the fast right after Ramadan is done, although it is better to do so because you never know when you're going to die. You may die right after Ramadan. May Allah SWT allow us to all reach the month of Ramadan. Ameen. But we don't know when you're going to die, right? So you should try to make up your fasts as soon as possible. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, this was like a trick question that was coming, that, I've not fasted all of my life. Do I need to do qada and kafara? I'll give you a couple seconds to think about that. So someone did not fast their entire life. Obviously, they have to make up the fast. But do they have to do qada and kafara, or only qada? The answer is only qada. Why? Because if you look back at the definition of what makes kafara necessary, it is intentionally breaking the fast. So you're already fasting, and then you break the fast. But if someone never fasted their entire lives and they were supposed to, they've been Muslim, there was nothing barring them from fasting, and they didn't fast, obviously they're sinful for that. They're still sinful, but they did not break the fast so they do not have to do kafara. People who are exempt from fasting, travelers, sick people, okay, someone who is traveling does not have to fast. They can fast if they want to. They do not have to fast though, and they can make up the fast afterwards. Similarly, a sick person, if they want to fast, they can fast, but they do not have to fast. If a person cannot fast, then a person will do fidya. Okay, they will pay their fidya, which is an amount equivalent to sadaqatul fitr. However much a person pays for sadaqatul fitr, which is decided by the mosque committee, it is decided looking at the price of wheat and barley and the other things that necessitate for which sadaqatul fitr is calculated. It usually fluctuates from $5 to $10. So this is how much they would give for every fast that they miss. Okay, they would give $5 to $10 for every fast that they miss. If one paid their fidya, okay, so someone was sick, they were not able to fast, they felt that they're not going to be cured of their sickness. They're not very old, but they have an illness that they feel that I'm never going to be able to fast. So they pay the fidya, but then they're cured of that later on. They would have to make up the fast still, even though they paid the fidya, because the default is to make up the fast. Okay, so they would have to. However, if a person is very old, if a person is very elderly, and they know that they're never going to be able to make up the fast, then they could just pay the fidya, no problem, because they know that they're not going to be able to make it up later. This is the end of these slides. there are du'as to recite when opening the fast. After a person opens the fast, they recite this du'a. Allahumma laka sumtu wa ala rizqika aftartu. You know, there's different variations of this du'a. Allahumma laka sumtu wa bika amantu wa ala rizqika aftartu wa alayka tawakkaltu. Right? Or this other du'a that is mentioned here, ذهبت الظمأ وابتلت العروق وثبت الأجر إن شاء الله. Okay, which means that the thirst has gone, the veins are moistened, and the reward is established, inshallah. So this is the end of these slides. I know that the program was advertised to be from 8 to 9, but obviously there's a lot to discuss for the fiqh of fasting and the fiqh of Tarāwīḥ. I completed the section of fiqh of fasting, and I will now discuss the fiqh of Tarāwīḥ. These slides are much less, so inshallah, there will probably just only be 15 more minutes of the program before I am able to answer anyone's question, if there are any questions. Okay. So the fiqh of Tarāwīḥ. As I mentioned, this is a very sad situation that we are all in. Right? May Allah Ta'ala make it easy for all of us. As someone who leads Tarāwīḥ every year, is something that it's very sad that we're not able to go to the masajid for Tarāwīḥ, even just not leading, but just going and experiencing, standing behind the imam. There's a special feeling during the month of Ramadan. Of course, due to the circumstances, we're not able to do that. So we will have to pray Tarāwīḥ at home with your own family members or individually. And so that's why I want to discuss the fiqh of Tarāwīḥ. Usually this is not really mentioned in programs leading up to Ramadan, but because of the situation that we're in this year, that is why I want to speak about it. The Tarāwīḥ prayers are sunnah mu'akkada, emphasized sunnah. They're an emphasized sunnah. There's something that is, there's a difference between sunnah mu'akkada and sunnah ghayr mu'akkada. Emphasized sunnahs that you're rewarded for doing it, but they're not emphasized. The Prophet ﷺ did not do them regularly. Tarāwīḥ is a sunnah mu'akkada for both men and women, right? So not just for men. So even in a normal year where people are going to the masjid for Tarāwīḥ, where the men go to the masjid, if the women do not go with the men, they should still be praying Tarāwīḥ at home. Tarāwīḥ is valid only after Isha prayer, and one can pray it until Fajr time. They may be performed before Witr, ideally before Witr, and then you pray Witr at the end. But if someone needs to pray, they forgot to pray some rak'ats. For example, if they're praying with the jama'ah and the imam is praying the witr, and they want to pray the witr in jama'ah and then make up the Tarāwīḥ, the rak'ats that they missed, they can pray it after witr as well. There is no qada for Tarāwīḥ prayers. And going back to the last point, this is a common misconception as well, that you can't pray anything after witr. Some people believe, this question comes a lot, that can you pray after witr? Yes, you can. You can pray tahajjud after witr. You can pray qiyamul layl. You can even do Tarāwīḥ if you miss some rakat after witr. So ideally, one would wait and pray witr at the very end of the night, as the Prophet ﷺ would do. But if you pray witr early on, you can pray other salahs afterwards. There's no qada for Tarāwīḥ prayers. So if a person missed Tarāwīḥ, or if they realize after Fajr time that I actually missed 2 rakats, or I didn't pray 4 rakats or 10 rakats, there's no need to make that up. It's not just that there's no need to make it up. There is no such thing as qada. So one should not make that up. Okay, Tarāwīḥ is a plural of tarwiha, which means a refreshment or rest, right? To rest. So the reason why Tarāwīḥ is called Tarāwīḥ is it's the plural of tarwiha. So tarwiha, the plural is Tarāwīḥ. And it refers to the resting periods after every 4 rak'at. As you see in the masajid, after the imam prays 4 rak'at, so he put 2 rak'at, then salam, then 2 rak'ats, then he'll wait for a little bit, 15, 20, 30 seconds, whatever, sometimes a little bit longer. That is what is called the tarwiha. That is the resting period. Okay. Now this definition, I want you to keep this in mind, because I'm going to come back to this in 2 slides, inshallah, to prove another point. But ideally, one should rest for the amount of time it took to pray the 4 rak'at, right? So if it took one 20 minutes, or let's say 10 minutes to pray 4 rak'at, ideally they should rest for 10 minutes and then pray the next 4 rak'at, then rest for 10 minutes. Then however long it took to pray the 4 rak'at, they should rest for that amount of time. That is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. In Mecca, for example, what people would do is that they would do tawaf after every 4 rak'at. So they would pray 4 rak'ats and they would do one set of tawaf. And obviously that would take around the time that it would take to pray 4 rak'at. In Medina, what they would do is that they would just pray other salahs during this time, or they would rest and do adhkar. Obviously, though, because the nights are very short, and if the imam was to wait during every tarweeh for the amount of time that it took to pray the 4 rakat, probably no one would join the jama'ah. It would go on for hours, so it would literally be double the amount of time. So that is why it is fine to just rest for a short period of time, even if it's just 15 seconds, 20 seconds. It is okay to just rest for a little bit and then start the next 4 rakats. I want to mention this briefly, that is Tarāwīḥ 8 rakats or 20 rakats. There's a famous hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha in which she says that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not pray more than 11 rakat in Ramadan. So she was asked, right? This was a question that was posed to her. It's mentioned in Bukhari that how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's prayer was during Ramadan. So she said that he did not pray more than 11 rakat in Ramadan or in any other month. So he used to pray 8 rak'ats and then 3 rak'ats of witr. Okay, 8 rak'ats and then 3 rak'ats of witr. So 4 rak'ats, and she mentioned that let alone their beauty and length. Imagine how beautiful and how long they were, right? The Prophet ﷺ would pray for long periods of time, such that his feet would even swell, subhanAllah. And then he would rest, and then he would pray 4 rak'at, and then he would pray witr. Now, many people use this as a proof that Tarāwīḥ is only 8 rak'at. However, the key thing to look at in this hadith is she mentions, if you can see my pointer, in Ramadan or in any other month, right? Is there any such thing as Tarāwīḥ outside of Ramadan? No, there isn't, right? So that's why the ulama mention that this is speaking about the tahajjud salah. So this hadith is speaking about the tahajjud, that the Prophet ﷺ would pray 8 rakats of tahajjud and 3 rakats of witr. That was his normal habit. So 11 rakats altogether, whether in Ramadan or outside Ramadan. But this is not speaking about Tarāwīḥ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a'lam. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we know through the ahadith that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the last year of his life, he came out near the end of his life during Ramadan to pray with the companions, and this is what Tarāwīḥ was. So he came out the first day, there was a small gathering. He came out the second day, there was a slightly larger gathering. He came out the third day to pray in Jama'ah with the people, there was a larger gathering. And on the fourth day, he did not come out. The Sahaba were waiting for him, but he did not come out. And the reason why he did not come out, he mentioned that he feared that it would become obligatory, it would become farad. If he kept this up, then people may think that, number one, it may become farad, and people may think that it is farad. So we have to pray the Tarāwīḥ every night. But as I mentioned, it is sunnah mu'akkada. It is an emphasized sunnah, and one should still do it, but they should not think that it is farad, right? So that's an important point to keep in mind. A sunnah mu'akkada is something, and I'm going on a tangent here, but it's important, that a sunnah mu'akkada, if a person leaves out a sunnah mu'akkada once or twice, that is fine. But if a person repeatedly leaves out a sunnah mu'akkada, then they are sinful for that. Because as I mentioned, sunnah mu'akkada is something that the Prophet ﷺ did regularly. It's an emphasized sunnah. So if you're regularly leaving something that the Prophet ﷺ did regularly, it's as if, you're killing the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So that's why a person is sinful for doing so. So anything that is sunnah mu'akkada, one should strive to do. Now, after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, during the time of Umar radiallahu anhu noticed that people were praying Tarāwīḥ separately within the masjid. He appointed one imam to lead the people in 20 raka'at. This is a very strong proof of it being sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Because if it was not sunnah, then the other Sahaba would have raised an objection. And this has happened, right? This has happened in other examples where Umar radiallahu anhu or another Sahabi may have mentioned something, and then the Sahaba mentioned that no, actually this is not Sunnah, or this goes against the Quran. For example, the famous ayah, the famous scenario in which Umar radiallahu anhu wanted to ban giving a large amount of mahar. But then someone stood up and said that Allah Ta'ala mentions that if you give qintar, if you give a large amount of mahar, whether it's a large amount or a small amount, do not take it back. Right? So this proves that it is valid to give a large amount of mahar. And Umar radiallahu anhu realized his mistake and he accepted that. So this would happen, that if a Sahabi mentioned something or mandated something and the other Sahaba did not agree, then they would mention it. But the fact that none of the other Sahaba raised an objection to him establishing 20 raka'at in the masjid, that is a very, very strong proof that this is the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it is one sunnah to pray 20 raka'at, and it is a separate sunnah to finish the Quran during the month of Ramadan. Okay, these are two separate sunnahs. If one is not able to do one, they should still try to do the other. Okay. If one is unable to finish the Quran, for example, many of us in this scenario, in the circumstance this year, we may not have a hafiz within the household to lead us in Tarāwīḥ and finish the entire Quran. What should they do? They should just recite whatever is easy for them, right? Whatever surahs they know, they should recite. Very simply, very easily, what they could just do is recite Surah Fil to Surah Nas. That's 10 surahs. So Surah Fil to Surah Nas, one surah every raka'at, and then just repeat that again, one surah every raka'at, and that would be 20 raka'ats. In order to save time during Tarāwīḥ, one should not leave out the sunnah supplications in prayer. Okay, so for example, the thana at the beginning of the salah, subhanakallahumma bihamdika wa tabarak asmuka wa ta'ala jadduka wa la ilaha ghayruk. In order to save time, one should not leave that out and just say Allahu Akbar, a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, bismillahir rahmanir rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. No, you should still recite the dua. You should still recite the thana. You should still recite the sunnah amount of times for what you would recite, Subhana Rabbil Azim in ruku and Subhana Rabbil A'la in sajda. Also at-tahiyyat, that's wajib, so one has to recite that regardless. And the durood, however, that could be shortened. So instead of reciting the entire durood, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad until the end, Allahumma barik ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad until the end, one can suffice with just saying Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, for example. And also one may leave out the supplication at the end before the two salats. Whatever dua you recite after durood Ibrahim, so whether it's Allahumma inni zalamtu nafsi or Rabbi ja'alni muqima salat, whatever it is, you can leave that out, right? Because that's not even sunnah mu'akkada necessarily. So you should still you should recite all of the du'as that one would normally recite in du'a, but you could shorten it at the end of the prayer, right? So the durood you can make shortened, and you can also leave out the supplication. And this is only to save time, right? But if one has time, and quite frankly, most of us are going to have time this Ramadan. We're working from home. Everyone's at home. You most likely will have time, so you should just do everything according to the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Frequently asked questions. You may have some of these questions in the live chat, so I just want to mention these here. That can a non-baligh boy lead the salah? So first of all, a woman cannot lead men in salah. Can a non-baligh boy lead the prayer? No. So you have two different opinions. Some scholars say that it is valid, that a non-baligh boy can lead the prayer because it is nafil for him, and it is also nafil for the people standing behind him, so therefore it's valid. Whereas other scholars, and it's a safer opinion of the two, so this is what I would advise as well, is that a non-baligh boy cannot lead the prayer. Why? Because although it is nafil for him, it is nafil for the muqtadis, it is not binding upon him. So if he breaks his salah, technically he does not have to make up that salah. But if the muqtadis who are baligh, if they break their salah, they have to make up that salah. So although there's nafil for both, but it's binding upon the baligh individual and is not binding upon the non-baligh. So a non-baligh boy should not lead baligh individuals. If he leads other non-baligh, non-mature individuals, and that's fine. Is virtual Tarāwīḥ permissible? virtual Tarāwīḥ is not permissible. 99%, and I literally, when I'm saying 99%, I mean like 99% of ulama, if not more, say that it is invalid. You know, you have like 0.1% or 1% of ulama. There are some scholars who say that Tarāwīḥ maybe or Salah is permissible virtually, but this is not the dominant opinion. And there are great scholars who do say that. So with all due respect. However, virtual Tarāwīḥ is something that is majority of the scholars agree is not permissible. And the reason why is because there is a great distance between the imam and those who are joining him, right? And one of the aspects of jama'ah is that they have to be within the same vicinity. They have to be in the same area, so within the same house, within the same masjid. But if one is a couple 100 feet away or within a couple miles away, that will not be considered jama'ah. There are other reasons as well, but for sake of brevity, I will suffice with this. Is Tarāwīḥ sunnah for both men and women? Yes, I already answered that. It is for both men and women. Can one perform Tarāwīḥ seated? Because it is a nafil salah, yes, one can pray Tarāwīḥ while seated. However, it is slightly disliked. It is makruh tanzihi to do so without a valid reason. So if one is very old, then they can. Or if one is weak, then they can. No problem. If they're sick, they could pray while seated, either on the ground or on the chair. No problem. But if one does not have a valid reason and they're just doing it out of laziness, then this will be makruh. Okay. What I'll do is I've never done this before, so let me open up the live chat and see if there are any questions. Okay, I don't believe there are any questions. I will just, I know that it is a little bit delayed, so I will leave like, in 30 seconds, if there are no questions, then I will just end. If there are any questions, at least I don't see any question. I just see one comment, but if there are any questions, then please do ask now. And if not, then within 30 seconds, I will end this live stream. Okay. Okay, so I do not see any questions. And I apologize if I'm not using this properly. But on my end, it's not showing any questions. So what I will do is I will end. So subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.